All right, so for the last problem types for factoring in R4, we are going to do factoring by grouping. And then I'm going to backtrack and I'm going to show you a different way to factor trinomials using grouping instead of the slide, divide, slide. So we just want to kind of sort of start out and say, what do you mean factoring by grouping? So I've got an example of 2 times the quantity of x plus y plus 6n times the quantity of x plus y. So when I'm looking at this, I notice, I'm looking for colored pens, that literally I've got this term, because remember terms are separated by addition, subtraction, and this is just a big multiplication chunk. So I've got this chunk plus this chunk. So when I look at these two chunks, my first question is, well, do they have anything in common? And I notice that they each have an x plus y. So I'm going to factor out an x plus y. And remember when I say I factor out, or if I pull it out or divide it out, whatever, what I'm really truly doing is dividing it out. So what am I dividing out? I'm dividing out an x plus y. So if I ignore this term for a second, what is 2 times x plus y divided by x plus y? Well, it's going to leave just the 2. So tell me what you're dividing out, and then tell me what's left. So that's the first term. Well, now look at the second term. If I divide out the x plus y, what is 6n times x plus y divided by x plus y? Well, any number divided by itself is 1, so that's just going to leave a 6n. So I've got 2 plus 6n. And now you'll notice that I've got a set of parentheses times a set of parentheses. So if I FOIL this out, 2 times x is going to be 2x, and then 2 times y is going to be 2y, and then 6n times x is 6nx, and then 6n times y is 6ny. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you from here on out is tell me what is in parentheses, so that's x plus y, and then tell me what's not in parentheses. So what's not in parentheses is the 2 plus 6n. Okay, and that's just going to be a little bit easier for us to process. So let's try it again. So if I've got a p squared, q squared, minus 16, and then minus 2q squared, and plus 8p squared. Okay, so the first thing I want to do every time I factor is see if there's something common. So this has p's, this doesn't, and this does. So I don't have p's all the way across the board. This has q's, this doesn't, this does, but this doesn't. Okay, this has numbers, but this doesn't. And so basically there's nothing I can pull out of all 4 terms. So the first thing I want to try is see if there's a way I can group this thing up where I can go term by term. And I'm going to group the first 2 terms together and then the next 2 terms together. So looking at just these first 2, there's nothing in common. Okay, so that's a bad combination. So I'm going to rewrite it, and I'm going to put this minus 2q squared with him, and then kick that minus 16 to the end. So what I have now is a p squared, q squared, minus 2q squared, and then a plus 8p squared minus 16. So all I did was pull this minus 2 squared here, plus 8p squared, and then I kick that negative 16 to the end. And I can rearrange addition, because 3 plus 7 plus 2 is the same thing as 7 plus 2 plus 3. So order in addition doesn't matter. So I can rearrange to my heart's content. Well, now let's see if we can try it. So there's still nothing in common across all 4 terms, but let's look at just the first 2. Well, now I got something in common. So what do both terms have? I got q's in both terms, and I can pull out 2 q's. So I'm going to pull out a q squared from just the first 2 terms. So remember, you're dividing. So if I pull out a q squared, that's going to leave me with a p squared. And if I pull out a q squared here, that's going to leave me with a minus 2. Okay, well, now try it again. So come over here. Is there something I can pull out of both of these? Well, I can pull out an 8. Okay, I can pull an 8 out of both of those. So I'm going to pull out a positive 8. I'm leading off positive, so don't pull out a negative 8. And that's going to leave me with a p squared minus 2. And now look at this magic. Your parentheses match. So if your parentheses match, I'm right up where I was here. Okay, so tell me what is in parentheses. Well, I got a p squared minus 2. Tell me what's not in parentheses, which is a q squared plus 8. And then see if you can break it down any further. This is not the difference of two perfect squares. So for now, I'm going to leave it like that. This is the sum of two not perfect squares. So just leave it. You're done. That's as far as you can go. So this one is done. All right, so let's try, let's go back, and I'm going to use factoring by grouping instead of using slide, divide, slide. And I'll probably, for the rest of the semester kind of bounce back and forth. So if I have a 6v squared minus 11v plus 4, what I taught you in the last videos to do, I've got a trinomial. There's nothing in common across all three terms. So now I say, okay, can I factor the trinomial? Okay, so if that's the case, I look and I've got a leading coefficient that's not 1. So I immediately went into slide, divide, slide. Well, let's try factoring by grouping on this one. So it's pretty much the same setup. It's just that I don't have to slide and divide. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply my first and my last, just like I did before. And that's going to give me a 24v squared. So I need two numbers that multiply to 24v squared, but they add up to a negative 11v. So they have to multiply to a positive. Your signs are the same. But they add to a negative, so your signs must be negative. And when I do that, I figure out it's going to be a negative 3v and a negative 8v. So a negative 3v times a negative 8v is 24v squared. And negative 3v minus 8v is negative 11v. Okay, so that's kind of sort of what we did before. But now what we want to do is instead of writing that negative 11v, I'm going to trash it and put these two in its place. So now I have a 6v squared, trash your middle term and put these in its place. Okay, and do not simplify. If you simplify, you're going to end up back up here. So now let's do factoring by grouping. If I cover up the last two terms and just deal with the first two, I can pull out a 3v from both terms. So divide out a 3v, and that leaves me with a 2v minus 1. Do not forget the minus 1. Okay, remember you're dividing. So any number divided by itself is 1. Okay, so now come over here. This is a negative. We don't like to lead off negative, so I'm going to pull out a negative, whatever I pull out. Well, I can pull a 4 out from both. So I'm going to pull out a negative 4. And that's going to leave me with a positive 2v minus 1. And now look at this magic. Your magic is your parentheses match. They must match. Okay? So my parentheses match. So tell me what is in parentheses. And then tell me what is not in parentheses. So that's just another method to get the same answer as if we had done slide, divide, slide. So let's try another one. So let's do 5s squared. 5s squared plus 14s's plus 8. And then what I notice is that it's a trinomial. There's nothing common across all three terms. And so from here, I am going to choose to either do slide, divide, slide or factoring by grouping. I don't care which method you do. You'll get the same answer I do as long as you do it right. Okay, so since we're practicing slide, divide, slide, that's what I'm going to do. So first times last is going to give me 40s squared. So I need two numbers that multiply to 40s squared that add up to 14 s's. So that's going to be a 4s and a 10s. Okay, so I'm going to trash my middle term, put those two terms I just found in its place. So that gives me a 5s squared plus 4s plus 10s plus 8. And now I'm going to do factoring by grouping. Okay, so I'm going to look at just the first two terms. What's common? Well, I can pull out an s. Okay, so I'm going to pull out an s. That leaves me with 5s plus 4. Okay, what's common on the last two? I can pull out a positive 2 because I'm okay leaving off positive. So pull out a positive 2, and that leaves me with a 5s plus 4. So now tell me what is in parentheses since they match, and then tell me what is not in parentheses. And the last thing you do is see if you can break it down further. And I can't, so I'm done. So we're going to try one more just to get the whole thing done from start to finish. And I'm going to write smaller so I don't have to waste a page. So what I have is 18a to the third. And then I've got plus 51a squared. And then minus 42a. Okay, so first thing I do every time I factor is pull out something common if I can. Well, everything has a's, and everything has 3's. Okay, so I'm going to pull a 3a out of everything. So when I divide this by 3a, I get a 6a squared. When I divide this by 3a, I'm going to get a 120. I just completely lost what I was doing. I'm going to get 3 goes into 5 once with 2 left over, so I get 17a. Sorry, that was fun. Okay, and then when I divide this by 3, I'm going to get minus, that's a 1 and a 4. Okay, so all I've done is pull out a 3a from all 3 terms. So now, can I break this part down anymore? Well, yes, I can. So I'm going to multiply first and last, and I'm practicing factoring by grouping instead of slide, divide, slide. Okay, so I'm going to do factoring by grouping on this one. You feel free to do slide, divide, slide. But I'm going to multiply first and last, so a negative 14 times 6 is going to give me, negative 14 times 6 is a negative 84. So I've got a negative 84a squared. I need 2 numbers that multiply to a negative 84 that will add up to a positive 17. So if I use a positive 21 and a negative 4, okay, that's going to give me my 17a. So a positive 21 and a negative 4. If I multiply 21a times negative 4a's, I'll get negative 84a squareds. And if I do 21a's minus 4a's, I'll get 17a's. Okay, so drop this down. Your 3a is coming along for the ride. So now I've got a 6a squared plus 21a minus 4a minus 14. So my 3a comes along for the ride again, and then I'm going to look at what's common on those first 2 terms. So I have a 3a. What's common on my first 2 terms is I can pull out a 3a again, and that leaves me with a 2a plus 7. Okay, what's common on the last 2 terms is I can pull out a negative 2. So pull out a negative 2, and that leaves me with a 2a plus 7. Okay, so now tell me, remember, this 3a is coming along for the ride. So what I have for an answer is going to be my initial 3a from here. Tell me what is in parentheses, which is 2a plus 7. Then tell me what is not in parentheses, which is 3a minus 2. Okay, and that is how you factor. So that is it for R4, and I will see you in the next section.